Margaret marched toward my disabled daughter and shouted, "That wheelchair is an illegal vehicle." Sophia started crying as the HOA president dialed 911. "I want this 5-year-old arrested for vehicle violations," she demanded. The police arrived expecting criminals, but found a woman trying to arrest a child for being disabled. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Stop right there. Margaret's voice cut through the peaceful Saturday morning like a knife, shattering what had been a perfect day in an instant. My 5-year-old daughter Sophia froze in her electric wheelchair, her tiny hands gripping the controls as confusion and fear replaced the joy that had been lighting up her face just seconds before. She had been happily showing her best friend Emma how Lightning, her beloved wheelchair, could spin in circles and race across our driveway. "That illegal vehicle needs to be removed from this property immediately." Margaret Whitmore, our HOA president, marched across the street with the fury of someone who had caught us committing murder. In her hand, she clutched a thick folder marked, "Violation Documentation," in angry red letters. "I'm Michelle Rodriguez, and this is the story of how one cruel woman tried to destroy my disabled daughter's life, and how her hatred ultimately backfired in ways she never imagined." Sophia was born with spina bifida, a condition that left her unable to walk. But despite every challenge life had thrown at her tiny shoulders, she remained pure sunshine wrapped in determination. Her long, dark curls framed a face that radiated joy, and her laugh was absolutely infectious. She had endured 3 major surgeries, countless physical therapy sessions, and more doctor appointments than most adults face in a lifetime, yet somehow maintained an optimism that humbled everyone who met her. 6 months ago, after years of saving every penny, working extra shifts at the hospital where I'm a nurse, and organizing countless fundraisers, we finally bought Sophia her first electric wheelchair. The $8,000 piece of equipment wasn't just mobility gear, it was her freedom, her independence, her ticket to being like every other kid on our block. Sophia had decorated Lightning with colorful butterfly stickers, attached a small bell that jingled when she moved, and painted a lightning bolt on the back. She would spend hours talking to Lightning like it was her best friend, planning their adventures for the next day. We had moved to Willowbrook Estates specifically because it seemed perfect for raising Sophia. The neighborhood was wheelchair accessible, the schools had excellent special education programs, and our neighbors had been welcoming and supportive. Mrs. Chin next door brought us soup when Sophia was recovering from surgeries. Mr. Thompson across the street had even built a small ramp to help Sophia reach the mailbox. But we hadn't counted on Margaret Whitmore. Margaret was a cold, calculating woman in her late 50s who had ruled our HOA with an iron fist for 8 years. She lived in the largest house on Maple Street, a pristine mansion with gardens so perfect they looked artificial. Every blade of grass was exactly the same height, every flower planted in mathematical precision. Margaret herself was always impeccably dressed, never a hair out of place, with ice blue eyes that seemed to judge everyone she encountered and find them lacking. From the day we moved in, Margaret had made it clear she disapproved of us. She had already issued warnings about our garden gnomes being aesthetically inappropriate, and our welcome mat being the wrong shade of brown. But her hatred seemed to focus specifically on Sophia's wheelchair. "That mechanical contraption is an eyesore," she had once told Mrs. Chin, not caring that Sophia was within earshot. "This is a prestigious neighborhood, not a medical facility." That Saturday morning, Sophia had been excitedly showing Lightning to Emma, demonstrating how she could make it go forward, backward, and spin in circles. The 2 girls were planning an obstacle course, their laughter filling the air with pure joy. I watched from our front porch, my heart swelling with pride. After everything Sophia had been through, moments like these reminded me why we had fought so hard to get Lightning for her. This was what childhood should look like, carefree, joyful, full of friendship and possibility. That's when Margaret appeared like a storm cloud, her designer heels clicking aggressively against the pavement as she marched toward us with obvious hostile intent. "Excuse me? What are you talking about?" I hurried down from the porch, my protective instincts kicking in. Margaret's cold eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. According to HOA Regulation 47B, no motorized vehicles are permitted on residential driveways except for registered automobiles. That contraption violates multiple community standards. "That's not a vehicle," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite my rising anger. "That's my daughter's wheelchair. She needs it to get around." Sophia looked confused and scared, her small hands gripping Lightning's armrests. "Mommy, what's wrong? Did I do something bad?" "No, sweetheart," I said gently, "you didn't do anything wrong." But Margaret was just getting started. She opened her folder and began reading from official-looking documents like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Regulation 23C clearly states that any equipment that produces noise, has flashing lights, or could be considered aesthetically disruptive is prohibited in common areas. That wheelchair violates all three criteria. Are you seriously trying to ban my disabled 5-year-old daughter's wheelchair? I asked, incredulous at the absurdity of what I was hearing. I'm enforcing community standards that everyone agreed to when they purchased property here, Margaret replied coldly, her voice devoid of any human compassion. Disabilities don't exempt anyone from following the rules. If she wants to use that thing, she can do it inside her house where it won't affect property values. Emma started crying, frightened by the angry adult conversation she didn't understand. Sophia's lip began to quiver as she realized something was very wrong, even though she couldn't comprehend what. The wheelchair stays, I said firmly, my voice gaining strength from my outrage. My daughter has every right to use her mobility equipment on our own property. Margaret's face twisted with rage that seemed completely disproportionate to the situation. We'll see about that. If you refuse to comply with HOA regulations, I'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement. That child is operating an illegal vehicle without a license. The absurdity of her statement hit me like a physical blow. You want to call the police on a 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair? Rules are rules, Margaret sneered, her expression radiating a cruelty that was genuinely frightening. Age and medical conditions don't matter. She's breaking the law and I intend to press charges. Before I could respond, Margaret pulled out her phone and dialed 911 with the dramatic flair of someone who genuinely believed she was performing some kind of civic duty. Yes, I need to report illegal vehicle operation in a residential area, she said into the phone, her voice dripping with false authority. A child is operating an unlicensed motorized vehicle on private property in violation of multiple municipal codes. I watched in absolute horror as this woman actually called the police on my disabled daughter. Sophia was now crying, scared and confused by the hostile adult towering over her like some kind of nightmare come to life. Mommy, I don't understand, Sophia sobbed, her voice breaking my heart into pieces. Why is the mean lady angry at Lightning? Lightning didn't do anything wrong. My heart shattered as I knelt down and hugged my terrified daughter. It's okay, baby. Lightning didn't do anything wrong and neither did you. Margaret continued her phone call, adding dramatic flourishes about public safety concerns and repeat violations of community standards. She was clearly enjoying the power she held over us, feeding off our distress like some kind of emotional vampire. Neighbors were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Chun from next door was recording everything on her phone, her face a mask of disgust at Margaret's behavior. Mr. Thompson from across the street stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head in disbelief. Within minutes, a police cruiser pulled up to our house. Officer Johnson, a kind-looking man in his 40s, stepped out with a confused expression on his face. He had obviously been expecting something very different from what he found, a grown woman standing over a crying disabled child. Ma'am, he said to Margaret, I received a call about illegal vehicle operation. Where's the problem? Margaret pointed triumphantly at Sophia, who was still sitting in her wheelchair with tears streaming down her face. Right there. That child is operating a motorized vehicle without proper licensing or registration. Officer Johnson stared at Margaret for a long moment, then looked at Sophia, then back at Margaret. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Ma'am, that's a wheelchair. A medical device. For a disabled child. I don't care what you call it, Margaret snapped, her voice rising with indignation. It's motorized, it makes noise, and it's not permitted under our community guidelines. I want her arrested for vehicle violations. The officer's expression shifted to barely contained anger. Ma'am, you called 911 because a disabled 5-year-old is using her wheelchair? She's breaking multiple regulations. Margaret insisted, waving her folder like evidence in a criminal trial. The HOA has clear standards and medical conditions don't exempt anyone from following them. Officer Johnson took a deep breath, clearly struggling to maintain his professional composure. Ma'am, what you're suggesting is not only illegal but also violates federal disability rights laws. The Americans with Disabilities Act specifically protects this child's right to use mobility equipment. But Margaret wasn't backing down. Her years of unchecked power had convinced her that she was untouchable. I don't care about federal laws. This is private property governed by HOA regulations. I want that child cited for illegal vehicle operation. That's when Officer Johnson's partner, Officer Martinez, stepped forward. She was a stern-looking woman with kind eyes who had been quietly observing the situation with growing disgust. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said to Margaret, her voice ice-cold with controlled fury, "what you're doing right now is harassment of a disabled minor. If you continue to interfere with this child's use of her medical equipment, I will arrest you for disability discrimination and child endangerment." Margaret's face turned bright red with rage. "You can't threaten me. I know my rights. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here." "Your authority doesn't extend to violating federal civil rights laws," Officer Johnson said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "This little girl has every right to use her wheelchair wherever she wants on her family's property." The crowd of neighbors was growing larger, and everyone could feel the tension crackling in the air. Several people were filming, knowing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. But Margaret was beyond reason now. Her hatred and sense of entitlement had pushed her past the point of rational thought. "Fine. If you won't arrest her, I'll take this to court," she screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that made dogs bark throughout the neighborhood. "I'll sue this family for violating community standards. I'll have them evicted. That wheelchair is an illegal vehicle and I'll prove it." Officer Martinez had heard enough. "Ma'am, you're now threatening legal harassment of a disabled child. I'm going to need you to step away from this family and return to your property immediately. This is outrageous." Margaret shrieked, completely losing what remained of her composure. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the mayor. You'll all be sorry when I'm done with you." As Margaret finally stormed away, still screaming threats, Officer Johnson knelt down to Sophia's level. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, his voice completely different from the stern tone he had used with Margaret. "I'm really sorry that scary lady was mean to you. Your wheelchair is beautiful, and you have every right to use it anywhere you want." Sophia sniffled and wiped her eyes with the back of her small hand. She said lightning was bad. "But lightning helps me play with my friends." "Lightning isn't bad at all," Officer Martinez added, admiring the colorful stickers that decorated the wheelchair. "Lightning is awesome. And anyone who says different doesn't know what they're talking about." After the officers left, assuring us they would file a report about Margaret's harassment, I thought the nightmare was over. But Margaret was just getting started on what would become a campaign of terror against our family. Over the next few days, Margaret launched a full-scale war that was breathtaking in its scope and cruelty. She filed formal complaints with the city planning department, claiming that Sophia's wheelchair violated municipal noise ordinances. She hired an expensive lawyer to challenge Sophia's right to use her wheelchair, arguing that HOA regulations superseded federal disability laws. She organized a petition among neighbors to have us evicted for violating community standards. She contacted local news stations, trying to frame herself as a victim of reverse discrimination for standing up for property values. Most disturbingly, she began following Sophia whenever we left the house, taking pictures and videos with a professional camera, documenting every time Sophia used lightning. My 5-year-old daughter became afraid to go outside in her own yard. But Margaret had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated the power of a mother protecting her disabled child. I contacted the local disability rights organization, who immediately took up our case. They connected us with civil rights lawyer David Chin, who was particularly outraged by Margaret's treatment of Sophia. "What she's doing isn't just morally wrong," David explained during our first meeting. "It's a federal crime. Interfering with a disabled person's use of mobility equipment is a serious civil rights violation." The story gained traction when Mrs. Chen's video of the police incident went viral on social media. The sight of a grown woman trying to have a 5-year-old arrested for using her wheelchair sparked outrage across the internet. Local news picked up the story, then national news. Disability rights advocates from across the country rallied to support Sophia. The video was viewed millions of times, with overwhelmingly supportive comments for our family and harsh criticism for Margaret. The publicity brought Margaret's past behavior to light. Other neighbors came forward with stories of her harassment and abuse of power. The HOA board, horrified by the negative attention and potential legal liability, immediately suspended Margaret from her position. The city launched an investigation into Margaret's false police reports and harassment of a disabled minor. The district attorney's office announced they were considering charges for civil rights violations and child endangerment. Margaret's employer, a prestigious law firm, fired her when the video went viral, stating they couldn't employ someone who harassed disabled children. Her own adult children publicly distanced themselves from her actions. But the most beautiful moment came during a community rally organized to support Sophia. Over 200 neighbors, disability advocates, and complete strangers gathered in our local park. Children in wheelchairs came from across the city to show Sophia she wasn't alone. The local police department presented her with an honorary junior officer badge for her courage in the face of injustice. When it was time for Sophia to speak, she rolled up to the microphone in lightning, now decorated with even more stickers and a small American flag. "Hi everyone," she said in her sweet, clear voice that carried across the silent crowd. "My name is Sophia and this is lightning. Some people think lightning is scary, but lightning just helps me go places and play with my friends. I want all kids in wheelchairs to know that we're not different or bad. We're just kids who need wheels instead of legs." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. The rally raised enough money to create a scholarship fund for children who needed mobility equipment. The city passed a new ordinance specifically protecting the rights of disabled residents in HOA communities. Margaret, meanwhile, faced a mountain of legal troubles. She was charged with civil rights violations, harassment of a minor, and filing false police reports. Her lawyer fees and settlements cost her hundreds of thousands of dollars. The HOA voted to permanently ban her from any leadership position and passed new bylaws protecting disabled residents. She was also required to attend sensitivity training and perform community service with disability organizations. But perhaps the most fitting consequence came 6 months later. Margaret's mansion went into foreclosure due to her legal expenses. The new owners who bought it at auction? A family with 3 adopted children, 2 of whom used wheelchairs. As I watched Margaret pack her belongings into a moving truck, I felt no satisfaction in her downfall. What I felt was hope that Sophia would grow up in a world where no child would ever again be attacked for simply existing while disabled. Sophia, now 6, still uses lightning every day. She's become a confident advocate for other disabled children, often speaking at schools about inclusion and acceptance. The shy, scared little girl who cried when Margaret attacked her has grown into a fierce defender of others who face discrimination. Margaret's actions, intended to silence and shame a disabled child, instead amplified Sophia's voice and created a movement for change in our entire community. Today our neighborhood is truly accessible for everyone. And Sophia races around in lightning, free to be exactly who she is, a beautiful, strong, amazing little girl who refuses to let anyone dim her light. Because that's what real strength looks like, not the power to hurt others, but the courage to keep shining despite those who try to tear you down.